You packed for 6 months. You researched every outfit, every excursion, every outlet adapter, and then you walked up the gangway and a security officer pulled your bag aside. That item you bought specifically for this trip, confiscated. No refund, no appeal. Just gone, or held in a lockbox until you disembark a week later without ever using it. This is happening every single sailing, at every major port, to people who genuinely had no idea. Not because they were careless, because the cruise lines publish their banned items lists in places that require real effort to find, buried inside multi-page contracts written in language designed to protect the company, not inform the passenger. I've spent a considerable amount of time going through the current policies. Across the major lines, Carnival, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, Celebrity, MSC, Princess, comparing what they say publicly versus what their actual enforceable contracts state. And what I found is that 2026 has brought some meaningful additions and tightenings to these lists. Things that weren't issues 2 or 3 years ago are now being confiscated at the pier. So here's what this is. A practical, honest rundown of 40 items that are banned or seriously restricted across cruise lines right now. Some of these will surprise you. A few will genuinely frustrate you. And at least one will make you rethink something you've already packed. Pay attention, because some of these carry consequences beyond just losing the item. Let's start with electronics, because this category has probably caused more pierside arguments than anything else in recent memory. Standard power strips. The ones you have at home, the ones that work perfectly fine. Most cruise lines prohibit them entirely. The reason is fire risk, and honestly, that's a legitimate concern in a metal vessel with thousands of people sharing close quarters. What's allowed on most lines is a surge-protected power strip. No heating element, no independent on and off switches per outlet. The distinction matters. If you bring a regular power strip, it goes in the safe or gets confiscated. If you bring a UL-listed surge protector, the flat travel kind, you're usually fine. The specific brands don't matter as much as the certification marking. Look for UL listed or ETL listed on the housing before you pack it. Extension cords are outright banned across essentially every major line. No exceptions, no workarounds. Doesn't matter how short it is or what you plan to use it for. Leave it home. Irons and clothes steamers. This one surprises people because it seems so ordinary. Every major line bans personal irons. The reason is the same. Fire hazard. In a cabin, and they usually offer pressing services on board. Those services aren't cheap, so if you're packing fabrics that wrinkle badly, your smarter move is choosing different fabrics rather than assuming you can handle it with a travel steamer. Heating pads and electric blankets are banned too. I know. Cold sleepers, people managing chronic pain. This one genuinely stings. Some folks have had luck getting medical exemptions for specific therapeutic devices, but that requires documentation submitted before sailing, not at the gangway. Now here's one that's created real confusion in recent years. Candles. Not just decorative ones. Any candle, incense, anything with an open flame. This includes birthday candles, which create some uncomfortable conversations when families try to arrange cabin celebrations. The ship's own restaurants can do lit desserts because they're using their equipment under supervision. Your cabin is a different situation entirely. The food and beverage category is where the policies get genuinely complicated, and where I see the most variation between lines. Alcohol rules are the big one. Most lines advertise a generous alcohol policy. Bring a bottle of wine per person. And that's technically true for embarkation day only. When you return from a port stop, the rules shift significantly. Several lines have moved to confiscating alcohol purchased in port, and either charging a corkage fee to open it, or holding it until disembarkation. That rum you bought at a market in St. Thomas for a third of the ship's bar price. They may hold it and hand it back when you leave. Check your specific line's policy for port purchases, because this has changed recently, and the differences between lines are significant. Outside food is restricted in ways that vary enormously. Fresh fruits, raw meats, and certain agricultural products can actually create issues at US. Customs when you're returning. Independent of the cruise line's own rules. Several ports have agricultural restrictions that apply to what you can carry back on board after excursions. This is particularly relevant for Caribbean itineraries where fresh local produce is everywhere, and it's tempting to stock up. The risk isn't the cruise line confiscating it, it's customs creating a headache at re-entry. Coffee makers. Most lines have banned standard drip coffee makers and single-serve pod machines because they generate heat and can be left unattended. This creates genuine frustration for people who rely on a specific coffee routine. Some lines allow compact espresso devices that use manual pressure rather than electric heating, but check before you pack it. Homemade or home-canned foods are banned across all lines. Anything in an unlabeled container falls under this restriction too. If you've got a specific dietary need that you usually manage with homemade prepared foods, the conversation to have is with the special dietary services team before you sail, not at the security checkpoint. Mobility and personal transport gear has seen the most significant policy evolution in the last couple of years. Hoverboards and self-balancing scooters have been banned since around 2016 on most lines due to battery fire incidents, but they're worth mentioning because people still try to bring them. They will not make it on board. Full stop. Electric bikes and e-scooters are increasingly banned even for mobility assistance purposes, unless pre-approved as a medical accommodation. Personal mobility scooters, the kind used by passengers with limited mobility, go through a different approval process and are generally accommodated. But the recreational electric transport you might use to explore a port, most lines won't allow it. Drones. This conversation has gotten more serious. Multiple lines have moved from discouraging drones to outright prohibiting them, and the reason isn't just policy preference. It's maritime airspace regulation and the legal liability created by flying an unregistered aircraft near a vessel. Some lines will hold your drone for the entire sailing and return it at disembarkation. Others have language in their contracts allowing them to confiscate without return if you attempt to fly it. If you're a content creator building a travel portfolio, you need to know your specific line's exact current policy and understand that held for the duration is the best case outcome if you're caught. Selfie sticks are actually banned in certain areas on several ships, not everywhere, but in specific venues and entertainment spaces. This is newer policy, driven mostly by incidents involving contact with other guests. You can usually bring one for shore excursions without issue, but check whether your line restricts them on the vessel itself. The medication situation genuinely deserves more than a bullet point. Controlled substances, even with a prescription, require documentation that many travelers don't think to prepare. If you're bringing a Schedule II medication, certain ADHD medications, pain management prescriptions, sleep aids that fall into controlled categories, you need the original pharmacy-labeled container, the prescription paperwork, and ideally a letter from your prescribing physician explaining the medical necessity. Some ports have stricter import rules for certain medications than the US does, meaning even a valid US prescription doesn't guarantee smooth transit at every stop. CBD products exist in a genuinely awkward legal space on cruise ships. Even if you're sailing from a state where CBD is fully legal, you're operating under federal maritime law once the ship leaves port, and the legal status of CBD at the federal level remains complicated. Several lines have updated their prohibited substances lists to include CBD explicitly. Don't pack it and assume you'll figure it out later. Prescription marijuana, even with documentation from a legal state, is prohibited on all major cruise lines without exception. Maritime law governs, not state law. This catches people who made every effort to do things correctly at home. Self-defense items are where the maritime law piece becomes most consequential. Pepper spray, mace, and personal defense sprays are banned across all lines. The compressed container issue is part of it, but the more significant reason is that maritime law classifies these differently than they're classified on land, and the consequences of using one aboard a vessel involve a level of legal complexity most people aren't prepared for. If personal security while traveling is a genuine concern, the conversation to have is with the ship's security team about what resources are available on board. Tasers and stun guns are prohibited. Collapsible batons, and any striking implement designed as a weapon, prohibited. Knives beyond a certain blade length, usually around 4 inches, though this varies. Prohibited. This includes certain multi-tools with locking blades, so check your specific tool before packing it. Firearms. Obviously. But the nuance here is that some passengers, particularly those sailing from certain ports or on longer itineraries, make assumptions about firearms policies because they've had different experiences on other forms of travel. No firearms, no exceptions, no secure storage program. If you discover you've packed something inadvertently, which does happen, you'll be working with the terminal to arrange storage or return shipping, and the sailing may not wait. Laser pointers, even low-power ones, are prohibited. The maritime angle here is real. Pointing a laser toward a navigation bridge, or at crew operating any kind of equipment, is treated extremely seriously and can result in removal from the vessel. The battery situation has changed considerably, and it affects a lot of common travel gear. Lithium batteries above a certain capacity are restricted in how you can transport them. For portable chargers specifically, most lines follow IATA guidelines. Power banks above 100 watt-hours require carrier approval, and above 160 watt-hours are generally not allowed at all. Most consumer power banks fall under the limit, but if you bought a high-capacity unit specifically for a long trip, check the watt-hour rating on the housing. This isn't a cruise line-specific rule. It connects to international aviation and maritime safety standards. But it's newly being enforced with more consistency at embarkation. Spare lithium batteries stored loose in checked luggage are prohibited. This is consistent with aviation rules too. They need to be in carry-on equivalent baggage, protected from short circuits. Some photography and recording setups have started creating issues at the gangway, particularly for guests creating content. Professional lighting rigs with stands are banned, not because of any specific safety issue, but because they take up common area space, and several incidents involving setups in public corridors prompted policy responses. Compact ring lights for personal use are generally fine. Anything requiring floor space or assembly, not going to work. Certain gimbal setups and camera drones have already been covered, but there's a nuance worth adding. Some lines have begun flagging professional-grade audio recording equipment in the context of their no recording policies in certain entertainment venues. If you're planning to document your trip extensively, read the media and recording policy for your specific line before investing in additional gear. Suction cups and mounting hardware. This one seems minor, but it comes up more than you'd expect. Mounting systems that use suction or adhesive to attach to cabin walls or windows can void certain cabin damage clauses in your contract, and some lines explicitly prohibit them. Magnetic hooks, a popular cabin organization hack, are banned by a growing number of lines because certain cabin wall panels can be damaged by magnets or because the hooks create liability if items fall. Walkie-talkies are technically allowed on most lines but restricted in how you can use them. You can't operate on frequencies that interfere with bridge or crew communications. In practice, unless you're very familiar with radio frequencies, it's simpler to use the ship's internal communication services or message through their app. Inflatable pool toys beyond a certain size are restricted or outright banned on most ships because of pool safety concerns and space limitations. A small inflatable ring for a toddler might be fine. A large inflatable unicorn? No. And honestly, if you're sailing with young children, the ship's pool deck staff typically have appropriate flotation equipment available. Personal flotation devices brought from home are generally not permitted for use in the ship's pools. Only the approved safety equipment stowed in cabins for emergency purposes. Some lines allow personal snorkeling fins and masks. Others have moved to ban fins specifically in their pools and water features. Check before packing. Glass containers on pool decks and beach areas, if your itinerary includes a private island beach day, are prohibited. This is almost universal and has been for a while. But travelers still pack glass bottles of sunscreen or glass-bottled beverages into their beach bags and get stopped at the transition point. Certain aerosol products over a specific volume are restricted. Standard travel size aerosols are fine. Large cans of spray paint, certain industrial aerosols. Obviously not. But the gray area is in large cans of personal care products. Check volume limits for your specific line. Portable karaoke machines and personal Bluetooth speakers used in public areas often fall under noise. ordinance policies rather than a strict banned list, but enforcement has increased. In your cabin, a small speaker is generally tolerated. In the corridor, on a balcony at night, or in a shared outdoor space. Crew are empowered to ask you to stop, and repeated issues can result in confiscation. Now here's why all of this matters beyond just protecting your stuff. When you signed up for your cruise, you agreed to a contract that grants the ship considerable authority over what happens during the voyage. That authority extends to confiscating prohibited items, charging fees, and in more serious situations, particularly involving substances or weapons, to involving law enforcement at the next port or at disembarkation. The cruise lines are not being adversarial when they enforce these rules. Most of these bans exist because of real incidents that happened on real ships. The fire risk items caused fires. The electrical items tripped circuits. The substances created maritime legal complications that cost everyone involved significantly. What protects you is doing this one thing. Before you pack anything you're uncertain about, go directly to your cruise line's website, find the prohibited items list in the cruise contract section, not the FAQ, the actual contract, and cross-check it. Then, for items that exist in a grey area, call the line's customer service directly and document who you spoke to and what they said. That documentation doesn't guarantee anything, but it demonstrates good faith. The people who get caught off guard aren't careless. They're trusting that the summary on the booking page is complete. It rarely is. You now have a real picture of what's being enforced at gangways right now. Not the sanitized version from a booking FAQ, but the actual range of items that are creating problems for travelers who did their homework in every other area. That's a genuine advantage going into any sailing. Like this video, if at least a few of these caught you off guard, I'm genuinely curious how many people have had something confiscated that they didn't know was restricted. Drop it in the comments, because those real experiences from real travelers help me make this research more accurate and more useful for everyone watching. And if you're sailing soon, share this with whoever you're traveling with. Not everyone's going to go read a 40-page cruise contract before they pack, but they'll watch a video. And the 20 minutes you spend on this could save a vacation. Coming up next, I'm looking at what cruise lines have been quietly changing about onboard fees and gratuity structures in 2026, and the numbers are worth knowing before you book.